Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another draft grade edition of the Greeks Gridiron. I am Athan Hristodulu, and today we are going to be discussing the AFC runner-ups in the Buffalo Bills and how they fared in this 2021 NFL draft. Now, before we jump into the thick of things, for those of you that are seeing this, this is going up on a Saturday. I'm recording this on Friday afternoon. I have not been live. Obviously, this past week, I had some stuff come up earlier in the week, and then I actually lost my cat for a couple days, and I'm going to be straight up. I was a mess and had a hard time dealing with it. I have found him. He is, as you can see, sitting right behind me, returned home. He was a little bit shell-shocked himself, but everything will be going back to normal. I'll be back doing live shows starting this coming Monday. So, with that is why I have not been live the last week. So let's dive into the Buffalo Bills and discuss their draft and how they fared this year. First things first, we'll discuss the team needs, kind of what I felt was what they were really looking at heading into this draft. The Buffalo Bills are a team that were, I would say, more so reloading than anything else. This is not a team that needs a lot, but there was a few key things that I think they really needed to work on, and those two being the offensive line and edge rush. And then I had wide receiver thrown on here as well. I saw some other places say the same, and we'll get into that once we kind of talk about their wide receiver pick and why I have them on there. But for offensive line, really the run game sort of disappeared as I got late through the year. You know, that was probably the biggest glaring thing for me was, you know, you have somebody like Devin Singletary who has flashed and shown some very good promise, but towards the end of the year, it felt like all they did was just rely on Josh Allen to throw the football. And when it comes to playoff football, especially late in the year, you need to have a strong run game if you're going to get anywhere, and both Super Bowl teams showed that this year. You need to be able to run the football. So let's start with round one, pick number 30. They drafted edge rusher Gregory Rousseau out of Miami. This is a really good pick. This is somebody that slipped a little bit in some people's draft boards from what I found. He's described as somebody who has a freakish type build. He had 16 sacks in 2019, bends very well for somebody his size. The biggest concern was that he only had one season on the defensive line, and he struggled to beat tackles. A lot of his sacks came more from interior guys, like beating guards and things like that. And then the biggest thing was that he lacks like the diverse moveset you want from a premier edge rusher and for somebody going in the first round. So, some people graded him as a first rounder. Some people were more on second rounder for him, especially having not played the previous season. So a little bit up in the air on how I feel on the pick, but I do like that they went after the edge rush position and they went after it aggressively. Then going into round number 2, pick 61, they doubled down on edge rusher with one of my favorite edge rushers in the draft, Carlos Basham Jr. from Wake Forest. This is a guy that I think has a lot of talent. He's explosive for a guy that's so big. He's 285 pounds, agile, great inside moves to beat offensive tackles, and on top of that, he's a great block shedder. The criticism that kind of came across was that his production kind of dipped a little bit this past season, mainly because he has so much size on him now. He did get a little bit bigger. Some people were saying that if he dropped some weight, maybe closer to like that 265, 270 range, he would get that explosiveness back that he had the year prior and be a much better, more complete edge rusher. He only played 7 games this past season, which kind of hindered his stat value. He had 11 sacks the year prior, and then I believe it was 5 this past year. But I think overall, Carlos Basham's a guy that I have really high hopes for. He was on a handful of teams that I was like, they need to target this. This is actually a guy that I was hoping the Colts would end up drafting. As a Colts fan, this was somebody we needed edge rush and somebody I really would have liked to see them go after. And then one of the bigger knocks for him was more just the down-to-down consistency. He did play a lot, so there's a lot of tape of him playing really hard and then other plays where he's not being as aggressive. But, I kind of look at that as, okay, if you're playing so much, you're going to have that kind of like inconsistent somewhat tape. So I wouldn't put the knock on him too hard. I think this is a really good pick. Second, third round draft grade. They got him late in the second round. So I think overall a solid pick on round number 2. Going into rounds 3 and 5, they went after the offensive line. And this is what I like about the Bills draft is they had team needs and they went after it. Some people were knocking them for not addressing the offensive line with their second pick. But their offensive line was not terrible, so I don't want to sit here and say that it was pressing. I would say that edge rusher took priority over the offensive line needs that they have there, so I'm actually okay with them going their first and second picks after the edge and then going for tackles afterwards. Spencer Brown out of Northern Iowa, Great size and athletic ability. He's somebody with good blitz recognition, resets well from losing a block into winning blocks. Some of the issues that people had with him is that he stands too high at times. His footwork could be a little bit better. And it was one of the issues in pass protection is that he has a tendency to kind of lose his footing a little bit and not stay as square as he should be. But I think overall in the third round, this, in my opinion, might be a slight reach, but because they didn't have a fourth round pick, they probably felt inclined to go after him in the third round. So I'm kind of okay with it. I like it. This is a guy that I think could have gone in the fourth round had they had a pick, but since they didn't, they kind of rushed the pick and went third round. So I'm okay with it there. It makes sense to me. Then going into round 5, they have offensive tackle Tommy Doyle out of Miami of Ohio. This is a guy that's massive, 6'8", 323 pounds. He had 3 straight years of 80-plus grades per PFF in pass protection. So a guy that can hold down the fort for somebody like Josh Allen, who you're hoping to have, leading your team for the next 15-plus years. So very good in the pass scheme. And then, on top of that, he played both tackle positions, so that's really good as well. Somebody who has experience not only being on one side, but on both. So should injuries pop up, he doesn't have to start right away. He could be a good fill-in guy and just kind of be like rotational, comes in to relieve whoever's the starting at either position. So this works out well for him because it means that he does not need to produce immediately, especially being a 5th-round pick. You don't have to rely on him, and he can be a spell type of guy for whoever's leading those two sides, whether it's left tackle or right tackle. Some of the knocks on him, awkward mover. For somebody being 6'8", 326, that's bound to happen. That's a lot of body to be moving around on the field there. His hands could be a little bit slow at the point of contact, so some people, and that's more of like a technique thing that can be worked on as well. So that's not as pressing of a thing. And then for somebody being so long, his length can be ineffective at times. So again, going back to the awkwardness, not really knowing how to use all of that body efficiently. Again, more things to just kind of work on that. If he has good coaching, I think he can work through and become a legitimate guy to, even if he's just a solid starter for the team, whether it's at the left or the right side, depending on how, Spencer Brown shakes out for them. But overall, those first 4 picks, they went right after their 2 biggest needs. And again, this is a team that didn't need a lot. They had 2 pressing needs at edge and at offensive line, and I think they really went after it, and they did a good job doing it as well. Now, going into round 6, at pick 203, they got wide receiver Marquez Stevenson out of Houston. This is a guy who he only had 28 targets last year, only 1 drop, played in 5 games, so I like that. He was targeted 28 times, only credited for 1 drop. That's good. Good pass catching ability. Then from there, he had great acceleration, very explosive for run after the catch. And then on top of that, he could be a solid kick return. He had 3 touchdowns over the last couple of years as well. The biggest knock was his injury history, and an NFC scout was even quoted as being worried about that and him not being able to hold up in the NFL. And with any player, injury history is a concern. So getting him in the 6th round, though, I think is great. You're not putting too much into him. The injury history is there, and I think that those later rounds are really where those injury history type players should be going because you don't want to put too much stock into them. But wide receiver is a position I did personally have as a list because while you do have guys like Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley, I would say Stephon Diggs is like the legit guy. They lost John Brown to free agency, and now so you have Cole Beasley behind him. Beasley's he's getting older. He's not getting any younger. So it's like you have Stephon Diggs and then a bunch of other guys. So you really need to work on that depth a little bit. That's something I think the Bills might have to address going into next year. Or if at some point during the season, they feel, all right, we need to maybe make a trade halfway through the year. Julio Jones is a guy that's available. Imagine if he went to Buffalo and Josh Allen was slinging it to Julio Jones and Stephon Diggs. I mean, man, that would be a tandem to be having, throwing the football to. But I do like the Marquez Stevenson pick. You have good upside for a guy that has injury history. He also, his route running is not the best, but that's something that can obviously be worked on. And he struggled a little bit with contested catches, I guess, is from what some people were saying. I haven't watched a ton of video on him, to be honest with you guys. And so I can't really, stand on that hill or anything like that. But that seems to have come up a few times in a couple of different readouts about his draft profile. Then going into the later rounds of 6, the later portion of round 6, at pick 212, they got safety Damar Hamlin. This is a guy with injury history history, but massive upside, and I'm a really big fan of it as well. They already have a great safety tandem, but I mean, adding depth to the position and a guy that's a legit playmaker, I think was a very good pick here in the late rounds. Very good size, 5 interceptions and 26 pass breakups in the last 3 years. Very good at tackle angles, so he's very good at, positioning himself well to make the tackle. And then on top of that, he can overlap his coverage. So, even if it's not necessarily his assignment, he's very good at closing the gaps and, covering an area that might not necessarily be his and making up for the lack of, coverage from somewhere else, which is very good. He's a very rangy type of safety. The knocks to him, obviously the injury history is probably the big thing there. He can overcommit to open field tackles, So while he's good at angling himself at tackles, he can overcommit at times and it sets him up for failure. And then on top of that, he doesn't have like the elite speed you want. So there's the worry of him getting burnt by some of those elite speedsters. He's not quick coming off the back pedal, I guess. So that's something that'll have to be watched on. But like, again, the Bills, they're such a good safety tandem already over there in Buffalo that this is a guy that can learn from the safeties they have and hopefully maybe pick up a few things to help improve his game. He doesn't have to start, but he's learning and he's already shown that playmaking type of ability. So, I mean, great project player for them that I think could end up being really well for them. Then I saw this one. A lot of people said this. Rashad Wild Goose, probably one of the best names in the draft out of Wisconsin. Very physical type corner, strong bump and run kind of guy. Very short, good short area stickiness. So he stays on the corners really well. Good at reading eyes. He's a slot guy. The issue with him is that he might be a little too physical, and that's something he's going to need to work on. 13 career PI and holding penalties combined. So that's something that might have scared off some teams. If you're already on the bad habit of grabbing people, that's a type of thing that if it's that severe early on, it's very tough to knock that out of a player, so I can understand why they may have struggled with that. Then on top of that, he lacks true bursts and finishing plays that, at times I guess he's caught on tape, maybe not finishing quite as aggressively as some coaches would like to see. So more like he thinks he needs to clean up, but he played the slot really well. This is a guy that's probably going to be predominantly slot for Buffalo if he does get playing time. I think he did really well in the slot based off his grading and some of the things I've seen from him. So I do like him as a corner playing in the slot. Again, defensive backfield, not a strong position of need for Buffalo. This is a guy that depth, and on top of that, can learn from some of the guys that are already there and hopefully in time be able to actually produce and do well for Buffalo. Then with their last pick, 7th round, offensive guard Jack Anderson. This is a guy that is, he's a pure project. He's a brawler type of lineman. Quick stunt recognition is really well. So he's good at like catching what these like defensive schemes are trying to do to him, with whether it's like trick plays and things like that, or like crossing types of blitzes. He's really good at recognizing that. He's a 4-year starter. So despite being raw, he was constantly being the guy on his team in Texas Tech. And he has a very calm type of play style. This is something that he doesn't get lost in the type of, again, he doesn't get lost when all these like crazy blitzes are being thrown at him. He's very, very stern. And that's something you really need because, especially a young guy going to the NFL, you're going to be going up against some crazy blitz packages that are being drawn up that you just don't see in the college ranks. So you want a guy who can stay calm, who's already kind of good at detecting those types of trick plays and things like that. And I think overall, he's a good project guy for the team. I mean, he lacks like consistency is a big thing, so that's something he needs to work on. His run blocking footwork is not necessarily the best, and he needs to work on his body control from everything that I've read on him. But overall, I think it's a solid late round guy that, again, is a project pick. They drafted 2 tackles earlier in the draft, and they just added much needed depth to the offensive line, in my opinion. Now, that's everyone in the draft for Buffalo. This is a really good draft group. Again, this is a team that did not need a lot. They had 2 pressing needs in offensive line and edge rush, and they really went after it. Wide receiver is something they're going to have to start looking at, and they did somewhat go after it with a project player in the later rounds. So I'm going to give them a very solid grading because of that. They went after the team needs, and they went after it aggressively, and they did a good job adding depth in other positions as well. This is a very strong draft group in terms of just looking at what you need as a team and being able to address it and adding to, the other positions that you may not necessarily need, but, addressed and kind of like future-proofed yourself in a sense per se. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to give them a solid grade, A-, man. Buffalo did a good job addressing everything they needed. I like a lot of their players. The late round guys they're like high upside, project type players, and the guys that they drafted have some real promise with them. I am a very big fan of the Carlos Basham pick. I think that was a really good one for them, and you know, I'm excited to see how his career plays out. They, you know, both their edge rushers, they're pushing over the age of 30, so something they really needed to go after. And I think Basham out of those two I think Basham might end up having the better career than Russell, but I could be wrong on that. What do I know, really? I'm not a scout, but I like Basham. But overall, A- for the Buffalo Bills. Really like how they did. For you Buffalo Bills fans, I would love to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section below, so let me know. But I'll catch you guys later with another draft grade video. I'm Athan. I'll catch you later.